Breaking news! The Miami Dolphins continue to make moves, and fans are getting on Chris Greer's case. Some signings have not gone down well, and the pressure is mounting on the Dolphins GM. If you're in favor of firing Chris Greer, hit the like button. If you had the opportunity to have coffee with Stephen Michael Ross, what would you say to him? Comment below. Earlier this week, the NFL announced its compensatory picks, and Miami came away with 3 additional selections, 1 in the 3rd round, 1 in the 4th, and 1 in the 7th. This is a huge boost for the team as they look to retool and strengthen their roster heading into next season. Now, how did the Dolphins get these picks? It all comes down to the compensatory formula, which rewards teams based on player losses in free agency. The 3rd round selection came as a result of Robert Hunt signing a massive 5-year, $100 million deal with the Carolina Panthers. The 4th round pick was awarded due to Christian Wilkins' departure to the Las Vegas Raiders, where he secured a 4-year, $112 million contract. However, here's where things get interesting. Miami should have received a 3rd round pick for Wilkins' departure, but because he played less than 20% of snaps last season due to injury, the NFL's compensatory formula bumped it up to a 4th round pick. The final pick Miami received, a 7th rounder, was given because Deshaun Elliott left the Dolphins and performed at a high level for the Pittsburgh Steelers last season. Initially, it seemed like Miami would be awarded a 4th compensatory pick, another 7th rounder, which would have given the Dolphins 4 picks in the final round. But then, out of nowhere, the NFL recalculated the compensatory selections, and Miami got the short end of the stick. Tom Pelissero broke the news on Friday afternoon, reporting that the NFL Management Council had adjusted the formula, awarding a compensatory pick to the New Orleans Saints while taking one away from the Dolphins. On top of that, the Cleveland Browns and Los Angeles Chargers also saw their picks slide back due to the recalculation. So, instead of the 11 draft picks Dolphins fans initially thought they had, Miami will now have 10 selections in the 2025 NFL Draft. The breakdown looks like this: 1 pick each in rounds 1, 2, and 3, 2 picks in round 4, 2 in round 5, and 3 in round 7. Losing that additional 7th round pick is frustrating, but the big picture remains positive. Miami still has double-digit selections to work with, which is a major asset as they continue to build out this roster. And let's be honest, the Dolphins need these draft picks. While Chris Greer has done a solid job finding budget-friendly free agents who can contribute right away, there are still major holes that need to be filled. The defensive line, the secondary, the offensive line, there are gaps everywhere, and having this many picks means Miami can take multiple shots at fixing them. More importantly, the surplus of day 3 picks gives Miami some flexibility. They don't have to use all 7 of them in rounds 4 through 7. They can package some of those picks in trades, either to move up in the draft or to acquire proven veterans who are available on the market. We've seen Chris Greer be aggressive in the past, and with this kind of draft capital, the Dolphins have the ammunition to make some moves. Speaking of roster needs, let's take a quick look at Miami's most pressing concerns following the first wave of free agency. Right now, the number 1 need is still the defensive line. Even if the team manages to bring back Calais Campbell, which remains a possibility, they still lack depth at the position. The Dolphins need a true nose tackle, they need depth behind Zach Sealer and Campbell, and most importantly, they need a long-term plan. Campbell, at 37 years old, isn't going to be around forever. Whether he stays another year or 2, the Dolphins must start thinking about the future of this defensive front. Cornerback is another significant area of concern. The release of Kendall Fuller leaves a hole opposite Jalen Ramsey, and with Ramsey likely to retire in the next few years, Miami needs to start grooming his replacement sooner rather than later. The best way to do that? Draft a young cornerback now and develop him alongside Ramsey so that when the time comes, he's ready to step up as the CB1. The offensive line also remains a priority. The left guard position still hasn't been properly addressed, and with Tua Tagovailoa's health being a major point of emphasis, the Dolphins must make sure he's protected. A true safety and a second tight end are also areas that could use some attention. But here's where things get really interesting. Miami's extra draft capital could allow them to go beyond simply filling roster needs through the draft. Could they use those day 3 picks to trade for established NFL players? That's exactly what we're about to dive into next. Stay tuned, because we're going to break down 3 potential trade targets that could make an immediate impact on this team. But before we get into that, I want to hear from you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for the NFL Draft? Let me know in the comments. One of the most intriguing trade targets for the Miami Dolphins right now is tight end Michael Mayer from the Las Vegas Raiders. This name might not be at the top of every fan's wish list, but let's break it down. Mayer would be an incredible fit for Miami's offense, and there's real reason to believe a deal could happen. First, let's talk about the situation in Las Vegas. The Raiders selected Brock Bowers in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft, essentially pushing Mayer down the depth chart. On top of that, Mayer missed 6 games last season, not due to injury, but for personal reasons, and by the time he returned, his role in the offense had diminished. With Bowers now expected to be the primary pass-catching tight end in Vegas, Mayer could be expendable, making him a prime trade candidate. From Miami's perspective, adding Mayer would make a ton of sense. Right now, Jonnu Smith is the Dolphins' TE1, and while he had a solid season last year, breaking franchise records for single-season receptions and receiving yards by a tight end, Miami still lacks a true blocking tight end. That's where Mayer comes in. At 6 feet 4 inches and 250 pounds, Mayer brings the physicality Miami desperately needs at the position. His pass blocking grade jumped significantly in 2024, and his ability to contribute in the run game would be a huge asset in Mike McDaniel's offense. But here's where things get even more interesting. Champ Kelly, the Dolphins' new assistant general manager, was part of the Raiders' front office when they drafted Mayer. He knows the player well, and that connection could play a role in trade negotiations. The big question is, what would it take to land him? A couple of 7th-round picks might be enough, which is a bargain for a player who was a top 100 draft pick just a year ago. Given the depth Miami already has at receiver, they don't need a tight end to put up massive receiving numbers. They just need someone who can complement Jonnu Smith and help out in the run game. Mayer could be that guy. Now, let's switch gears and talk about another potential trade target, Jordan Davis, defensive tackle, Philadelphia Eagles. Miami's biggest need heading into the draft is along the defensive line, and Jordan Davis could be the perfect solution. Coming out of Georgia in 2022, Davis was one of the most hyped defensive prospects in the country. He was a first-round pick and was expected to dominate as a run stopper. But here's the thing, it just hasn't worked out for him in Philadelphia. While he's shown flashes of brilliance, he hasn't lived up to expectations, and with the Eagles losing Milton Williams in free agency, there's been speculation that Davis could be moved. Now, this isn't a sure thing. Philadelphia might decide to keep Davis and give him another shot, especially since they still have Jalen Carter and Josh Sweat up front. But if they're willing to move on, Miami should be all over this. At 6 feet 6 inches, 340 pounds, Davis is a monster in the middle of the defensive line, and Miami desperately needs a presence like that. Right now, Zach Sealer is the only defensive lineman under contract for the Dolphins, which is a massive problem. Even if they bring back Calais Campbell, they still need a long-term answer in the trenches. So what would it take to get Davis? Given his first-round pedigree, the price could be a 4th or 5th-round pick, and guess what? Miami has 2 picks in both of those rounds. Trading a 5th-rounder for Davis would be a no-brainer. He's still young, he's still incredibly talented, and maybe all he needs is a change of scenery to finally put it all together. Now, let's move over to the secondary, where another potential trade target is Martin Emerson Jr., cornerback, Cleveland Browns.